Everybody in my family got a thick cream invitation to my sister's wedding. I got a certified letter from a law firm, while 300 relatives and friends were opening envelopes with gold lettering and little tissue paper inserts. I was standing at my own kitchen counter signing for a legal notice, a cease and desist, from my baby sister's fiance, who is a lawyer, on behalf of my mother. It informed me in cold numbered paragraphs that I was not welcome at the wedding, that I was to have no contact with the family until further notice, and that I was to immediately stop making, quote, false and disparaging claims regarding ownership of the family home on Hillcrest Road. False claims about who owns the house on Hillcrest Road, the house where the entire wedding was going to be held. Here is what my mother and my sister and that smug young lawyer did not understand when they mailed me that letter to make me feel small. I was not making false claims about who owns the house on Hillcrest Road, because I own the house on Hillcrest Road. I have owned it, quietly, legally, and completely, for the last 6 years. The deed is in a fireproof safe in my home office, and it has my name on it, and only my name, and I paid $418,000 to save it from the bank the year they were about to lose it, and I never once said a word about it to anyone. And now my family had hired a lawyer to formally ban me from a wedding they were throwing in my own house. So I sat down at that kitchen counter with the cease and desist in one hand, and I want to tell you exactly what I did next and how it ended, because the day of that wedding did not go the way anybody in a cream envelope expected. If you have ever been the family scapegoat, the one they lean on in private and are ashamed of in public, stay with me right to the end of this one. Go ahead and subscribe so this reaches more people who understand, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from, because they should not have put it in writing. Let me take you back. My name is Talia. I am 34 years old and I am a trauma surgeon. And in my family, that last sentence is not a point of pride, it is the crime. I need you to understand something about how a scapegoat is made, because it is not loud and it is not obvious, and if you are one, you already know exactly what I am talking about. It is not that my family hated me, it is that from the time I was small, I was assigned a role, and the role was the difficult one, the too much one, the one whose successes were somehow always evidence of what was wrong with her. My younger sister Camille was the easy one, the sweet one, the one who never made anyone uncomfortable by being too smart or too driven or too honest. And my mother, Diane, ran our whole family like a stage production with those two roles already cast before I could even read. When I got a scholarship, my mother told the relatives that Camille had the real gift. She just did not, quote, push herself the ugly way Talia does. When I got into medical school, my mother cried, and I thought for one beautiful second she was proud, and then she said she was crying because she just knew I would use it as another excuse to look down on all of them. That was the water I swam in. I can give you the exact moment I learned my role because I was 9. There was a science fair, and I had built a working model of a heart with a little pump and red water, and it won first place for the whole school, and I was so proud I could barely breathe. I ran home with the blue ribbon and I showed my mother, and the first thing out of her mouth, the very first thing, was, well, I hope you thanked your teacher for all the help, because we both know you did not do all that by yourself. I had done all of it by myself. My father had watched me do it at the kitchen table for 3 weeks. But my mother needed a world in which my winning was a little bit of a lie, a little bit of a cheat, a little bit too much, and so she built that world with one sentence, in about 4 seconds, over a blue ribbon. And Camille, who was 5, watched her do it, and Camille learned her own role in that same 4 seconds, the way you learn the words to a song you will sing for the rest of your life. The good one, and the one who probably cheated. We were cast for life before I hit the 4th grade. Every good thing I ever did arrived already reframed as an insult I had committed against the family. So I did what a lot of scapegoats do. I left geographically as soon as I could, and I built a life, and I told myself I did not need them. And then, because I am a scapegoat and not a monster, the second they were in trouble, I came running with my checkbook open. And that is the part of this story I need you to really sit with, because it is the engine of everything. My father, Ray, died when I was 26. He was the one soft spot in that house, a quiet man who never had the spine to stand up to my mother on my behalf, but who would sometimes find me in the kitchen after one of her performances and just squeeze my shoulder and say nothing, which was the most he was capable of and which I understood. There was one night, the summer I was 17, after a particularly bad performance at dinner, that I have kept. My mother had spent the whole meal listing, for a visiting aunt, all the ways I was becoming cold and ungrateful, and her favorite word, difficult, and I had sat there and taken it, and then gone out to the back steps to be alone. And my father came out, and he did not say anything about my mother because he never could, but he sat down next to me on the step, and after a while he took an orange out of his jacket pocket and peeled it slowly, the whole peel in one piece the way he always did, and he handed me half, And we sat there and ate an orange in the dark, not talking. And right before he went back inside, he said the only thing he ever said to me about any of it. He said, Talia, you are not what she says you are. I know it, and someday you will know it too. Then he went back inside because that was all the courage he had, and it was not enough to protect me, but it turned out to be exactly enough to save me, because I held on to that one sentence for the next 17 years. You are not what she says you are. It just took a certified letter to finally make it true in a way that no one could argue with. When he died, he left almost nothing, because my parents had spent their whole lives living slightly beyond their means to keep up an appearance my mother could not live without. And the centerpiece of that appearance was the house on Hillcrest Road. It is a beautiful house, a big white colonial on 2 acres, with a wraparound porch and old oak trees and a view of the valley, the kind of house that tells the whole town you have arrived. My parents bought it when I was a teenager, stretching for a mortgage they could barely carry, because my mother needed the town to see us in it. And after my father died, my mother could not carry it at all. I did not find out how bad it was from my mother, because my mother would rather have gone down with the ship in silence than admit to me, of all people, that she needed help. I found out from Camille, who called me one night, crying 3 years after Dad died, and told me the house was going into foreclosure. The bank was weeks away from taking it. My mother had drained what little there was, had taken a second mortgage, had missed payment after payment, and was now facing losing the house and, worse in her mind, facing everyone finding out. And Camille, who has never made a hard phone call in her life without needing something, asked me if there was anything I could do. I need you to hear how that call actually went, because it is the whole family in 90 seconds. Camille did not call me because she was worried about our mother. Not really. She called me because our mother had finally admitted the situation to her, and Camille was panicking about what losing the house would mean for her plans, for the wedding she did not even have a fiancé for yet, but had been dreaming about her whole life. And when I asked the obvious question, why has mom not called me herself, Camille went quiet, and then she said, you know how she is. She would rather lose the house than ask you. She would rather lose the house than ask you. And there it was, the whole disease of my family in one sentence. My mother's pride was worth more to her than her own home, as long as the alternative was needing me. I remember sitting on my couch after that call, 31 years old, wrung out from a 14-hour shift, doing the math in my head and feeling that ancient, stupid, beautiful hope flicker up in my chest one more time. Maybe this is the thing. Maybe if I save the actual house, the literal roof over her head, she will finally have to see me. I know now that people like my mother never see you, no matter what you save. But I did not know it then. So I picked up the phone to go help the people who had spent my whole life telling me I was the problem. I was 31 years old. I was a few years into an attending surgeon's salary, and I had lived like a resident the whole time, so I actually had it. And I sat on the phone that night, and I felt the oldest pull in my body, the scapegoat's reflex, the one that says, maybe if you fix this, if you fix the biggest thing, they will finally see you. So I said yes. But this time, for the first time in my life, I was smart about it. I called a lawyer before I called my mother. Her name was Dana Whitfield, and she has become one of the most important people in my life. And what she told me that first meeting probably saved me. I told her I wanted to pay off my mother's house to stop the foreclosure. And Dana asked me a question no one in my family had ever asked me. She asked me, and what do you want to have happen to that money if this family treats you the way you are describing they have always treated you? And I did not have an answer. So Dana laid out the options, and we chose one together. I would not give my mother the money. I would not pay off her mortgage as a gift, which would simply hand my mother back a house she would remortgage within a year. Instead, a small holding company that Dana set up for me would purchase the house outright, satisfy the bank, clear the foreclosure, and take title. The deed would be in my name, and my mother would be allowed to live in it for the rest of her life, rent-free, under a simple written agreement as long as she lived. She would keep her home, she would keep her appearance, she would keep her precious standing in that town. She would just no longer own the house she was standing in. I would. And here's the part that tells you everything about who I was then and who my mother is. I did not do it to have power over her. I swear that to you. I did it because Dana looked me in the eye and said, Talia, you are about to spend $400,000 to rescue people who have spent your whole life telling you that you are the problem, and I am not going to let you do it in a way that leaves you with nothing but their contempt and a house they can lose again. Protect yourself, even while you help them, especially while you help them. So I bought the house on Hillcrest Road for $418,000. I cleared the foreclosure. I saved my mother's home. The day the sale recorded, Dana mailed me the deed, and I remember opening that envelope at my kitchen counter, the same counter where I would one day open the cease and desist. And I looked at my own name on the title to the house I grew up in, the house where I had been told 1,000 times that I was too much, and I did not feel like a conqueror. I felt like a little girl who had finally been handed proof that she was real. I bought a small fireproof safe that week, and I put the deed in it, and I closed the door, and I made myself a promise that I have kept. I promised I would never once bring it up, not at a holiday, not in an argument, not on the worst day. I would carry the truth quietly and let my mother keep her home and her pride, and I would not become the kind of person who holds a rescue over the people she rescued. I kept that promise for 6 years, perfectly. And my reward for keeping it was a letter calling me a liar. There is a lesson buried in there about who benefits from your silence, and it is not always you. And when it was done, my mother called me, and I braced myself foolishly one more time for a thank you. She said, "Well, I hope you are not going to hold this over us." That was it. That was the entire thank you for $418,000. I hope you are not going to hold this over us. I told her I would never bring it up, and I meant it, and for 6 years I kept that promise so completely that my mother was able to do something extraordinary. She was able to forget it ever happened. I want to pause here for just 1 second. The stories like this one, the ones I could not tell for years without my hands shaking, I put on perfect revenge stories first and nowhere else. If you want to be here when the next one lands, go ahead and subscribe and turn on the bell. Now, let me tell you what happened when my sister got engaged. For 6 years, I quietly owned that house, and I quietly paid the property taxes on it, and I quietly covered a new roof and a new furnace when they failed, all through Dana's holding company, all without ever being thanked because, as far as my mother had reconstructed the story in her own mind, she owned her home free and clear because she was a strong and capable woman who had weathered a hard patch. I let her have that story. I told myself I did not need the credit. And during those 6 years, the family narrative about me only got worse because a scapegoat who moves away and gets successful is even more useful than one who stays. I became the villain of every holiday I could not attend because I was on call saving actual human lives. I became the cold one, the one who thought she was better than them, the one who, quote, abandoned her poor widowed mother, a phrase my mother deployed at every gathering while living in a house that widowed mother did not know she no longer owned. I want to tell you about the Christmas that supposedly proved I had abandoned the family because it is a good example of how the story got made. That Christmas, I did not come home, and my mother told everyone that I had chosen my career over my family, that I could not even be bothered to show up for one holiday. Here is what actually happened that Christmas. I was in an operating room from 11 at night on Christmas Eve until almost 6 on Christmas morning, with my hands inside the chest of a 19-year-old kid who had been in a head-on collision on an icy road on his way home from his own family's dinner. He lived. He is in college now, and he sends me a card every December. That is the abandonment my mother described to the relatives over Christmas ham. I saved a teenager's life, and it became one more chapter in the legend of cold, ungrateful Talia. And somewhere around then, I stopped trying to correct the record, because you cannot correct a record that is being kept by someone who needs it to say what it says. I just did the work, and I let them tell their story. And I told myself I did not need them to know the truth. I was lying to myself about that, a little. Everyone needs someone to know the truth. That is the whole reason I am telling you. Camille, meanwhile, drifted through her 20s on my mother's favoritism and my father's old connections, and eventually she met Preston. Preston Ashworth comes from what my mother would call a very good family. Old money, the kind with a name on a hospital wing, which is a detail that is going to matter enormously in a few minutes. And when Camille brought Preston home, my mother saw the entire rest of her life open up in front of her like a door. This was it. This was the marriage that would cement the appearance she had spent 40 years and nearly her whole family's happiness maintaining. The Ashworths would come to the wedding. The Ashworths would see the beautiful white colonial on Hillcrest Road with the wraparound porch and the old oaks. The Ashworths would understand that Camille came from people of substance. There was only one problem with my mother's beautiful production: me. Because I do not fit the story my mother tells about our family. I am the successful one, but I am successful in a way my mother cannot control or take credit for. And worse, I am the one who knows the truth about the house. And worst of all, I am the one who does not perform. I do not laugh at the right times. I do not pretend my mother is a saint. And my mother was terrified, genuinely terrified, that at some point during a weekend with the Ashworths, I would either outshine Camille or say something true, or, in her deepest nightmare, that the subject of the house would somehow come up. So my mother made a decision. She decided that the safest thing for her production was for me not to be there at all. Now, she could not just not invite me. Even in my family, a surgeon sister who is simply left off the guest list raises questions, invites sympathy, becomes a story. My mother needed me gone in a way that made me the villain, so that my absence would be my fault, evidence of my coldness. One more chapter in the legend of difficult Talia. And this is where my sister's fiance, Preston the lawyer, comes in, because my mother found in Preston a man who was more than happy to solve a family problem with a threatening letter. The story they built was this. A few weeks before the invitations went out, I had made an offhand comment at a rare family dinner when my mother was going on and on about her house and her renovations and her plans. And I had said mildly, carefully, Mom, you know we should really talk about the house paperwork at some point. That is all I said. Let me set that dinner for you because my mother has since described it as the night I threatened her. It was a Sunday dinner, one of the few I made it to that year, and my mother spent the entire meal talking about the house, her house. She was telling Camille and Preston about the renovation she wanted to do before the wedding: new landscaping, repainting the porch, redoing the kitchen, tens of thousands of dollars of work on a house she did not own. And at one point, she looked at me and said, with a little laugh, of course Talia would not understand. She has never had to worry about a mortgage in her fancy life. She has never had to worry about a mortgage, said to the woman who was, at that very moment, holding the mortgage that no longer existed because that woman had quietly erased it. And I felt the truth rise up in my throat, and I swallowed it, the way I always had, but I was tired, and so I said the one small, careful thing. I was honestly giving her an opening because 6 years is a long time, and I thought maybe, with a wedding coming and the Ashworths involved, it was time to gently bring the truth into the open before it blew up at the worst possible moment. My mother's face went white, and then it went hard, and she changed the subject, and I let it go. But I had said the word house, and I had said the word paperwork, and in my mother's mind, that was a threat. That was me finally about to, quote, hold it over them, and she panicked. So she and Camille and Preston decided to get ahead of it. They decided to recast my gentle comment as harassment. They decided that I was a delusional, jealous, difficult woman who had begun making, quote, false and disparaging claims that I somehow owned the family home, claims that could, quote, embarrass the family in front of respected guests. And Preston, the good future son in law, drafted a cease and desist on his firm's letterhead, and my mother signed off on it, and they sent it to me by certified mail in place of a wedding invitation. Ban the difficult daughter. Get it in writing, make her the villain of her own exclusion, and put, in a formal legal document, the assertion that my claim to own the house on Hillcrest Road was false. They put their central lie in writing on law firm letterhead and mailed it to the one person on earth who had the deed in a safe. I have thought many times since about the breathtaking arrogance of that, and I have come to understand it is not arrogance exactly. It is that my mother had lied about the house for so long, to the town, to the Ashworths, and most of all to herself, that she had genuinely come to believe it. She was not knowingly putting a lie in writing. She had forgotten it was a lie. That is what 6 years of my silence had bought her. A delusion so complete she was willing to sign it. The day that certified letter arrived, I did not cry and I did not rage. I sat at my kitchen counter and I read all 4 pages, and then I read them again, and I felt something settle in me that had been unsettled for 34 years, because for my entire life, my mother had made me doubt my own reality. That is what scapegoating does. It makes you the crazy one. It makes you constantly wonder if maybe you really are too much, too cold, too difficult, if maybe the problem really is you. And now, finally, my mother had done the one thing that made my reality undeniable. She had put her version in writing, and her version was factually, provably, recordably false, and I had the county records to prove it. For the first time in my life, I was not the crazy one. I was the one holding the deed, and I called Dana Whitfield. Dana read the cease and desist, and I could hear her getting quiet on the phone in the way that a good lawyer gets quiet when the other side has made a catastrophic mistake. And she said, Talia, do they know? Do they genuinely not know that you hold the title? And I said, Dana, I do not think my mother even remembers it is not hers anymore. And Dana said, then we need to decide what you want, because you are holding every card here, and you can do anything from nothing to everything, and you need to choose on purpose and not in anger. And that is the conversation that changed how this ended. Because my first instinct, I will be honest with you, was everything. My first instinct was to have Dana send a letter back that would detonate my sister's wedding, that would inform the Ashworths and the caterers and the whole world that the wedding was scheduled to take place on property owned solely by the banned and disparaged sister, that would cancel the event with the cold precision of the law. I could have done that. I owned the house. I could have simply declined to allow a wedding to be held on my property, and there would have been nothing they could do. I could have burned my sister's wedding to the ground from 4 states away with a single email. And for about a day, I wanted to. But Dana asked me the question that she is very good at asking. She said, "And after you do that, who are you?" She said, "Right now, in this story, you are the only person who has not done anything wrong, and that is a very powerful place to stand. And the moment you blow up a wedding out of revenge, you hand them the story they have been telling about you for 34 years, gift wrapped. You become difficult Talia who ruined Camille's day. Do you want to be right?" she asked me, "or do you want to be free?" And I sat with that for a long time, because they are not always the same thing. And I realized that what I actually wanted was not to destroy my sister. Camille is weak and she is spoiled, and she went along with the cruelty. But Camille is also a woman who was raised in the same house I was, cast in the other role, and in her own way, she is as trapped by my mother's production as I ever was. What I wanted was for the truth to stop being something I had to swallow to keep other people comfortable. What I wanted was to walk into that house, my house, on that day, as myself, and to never again be told that my own reality was a false and disparaging claim. So Dana and I made a plan that was not everything and was not nothing, and I am so glad we did. Here is what we did. Dana sent one letter, a calm one, to Preston's firm. It did not threaten anyone. It simply politely enclosed a certified copy of the recorded deed to the house on Hillcrest Road, showing sole ownership by my holding company, and a copy of the 6-year-old life tenancy agreement my mother had signed, and it noted, without commentary, that my client was of course happy for the family to use her property for the wedding and looked forward to attending as an owner and a guest. That was it. No demands, no threats, just the truth, on their own letterhead's reply with the documents attached, sent to the lawyer who had put the lie in writing. And then we waited. I would have paid a great deal of money to see Preston Ashworth's face when he opened that envelope, because Preston, whatever else he is a competent enough lawyer to understand in about 4 seconds what he was looking at. He was looking at proof that his firm, under his name, had sent a formal legal document making a false factual assertion on behalf of a client, my mother, against the actual titled owner of the property in question. He was looking at the fact that his future mother-in-law had used him to commit what a bar association might take a real interest in. And he was looking at the fact that the wedding he was about to have in front of his old money parents was scheduled to take place, catering and band, and 300 guests in all, on land owned entirely by the woman they had just tried to legally erase. Preston called Dana within the hour. The tone, she told me, was very different from the cease and desist. Dana told me later that Preston's first words on that call were, "There has to be a misunderstanding," and Dana said calmly, "There is no misunderstanding, counselor. There is a recorded deed, and I think you have already read it twice." And there was a silence on the line, the specific silence of a young lawyer realizing he has stepped on a rake in front of the exact people he most wanted to impress. Because here is what Preston understood in that silence. He had not just insulted a difficult sister-in-law. He had, on his firm's letterhead, under his own signature, sent a formal legal threat asserting a fact that the county records flatly contradicted on behalf of a client, my mother, who had no standing to make it. That is not a family squabble. That is the kind of thing that follows a young attorney around, and he had done it to help his future mother-in-law hide a lie he did not even know was a lie, which is what happens when you let a woman like my mother point you at a target. You become the one holding the weapon when the truth finally arrives. Preston spent the rest of that engagement, and I suspect a good deal of his marriage, being much more careful about whose version of a story he signs his name to. What happened next happened fast, and it happened mostly out of my sight, in the panicked space between my mother and Camille and Preston, and I only learned the full shape of it later. Preston, understandably, wanted the whole thing to simply go away. He wanted to quietly rescind the cease and desist, apologize, invite me warmly, and make sure that no one, especially his parents, ever learned that the great colonial on Hillcrest Road did not belong to the family they were marrying into. Camille, when she finally understood what her mother had actually done, when she understood that the house was not ours and had not been for 6 years, and that our mother had let her plan an entire wedding on a lie, called me, and that phone call is one I will remember for the rest of my life because it was the first honest conversation my sister and I had ever had. She was not performing. She was terrified and she was ashamed, and she said, "Talia, is it true?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Why did you never tell me?" And I said, "Because Mom asked me not to hold it over you, and I kept that promise for 6 years, right up until the day the three of you mailed me a letter saying I was a liar." And Camille was quiet for a long time. And then she said the thing that told me she was not entirely lost. She said, "I did not know about the house, Talia. I swear I did not. But I knew banning you was wrong. And I did it anyway, because it was easier. And I have known my whole life that going along with mom about you was easier, and I'm so sorry. It was easier. That is the truest thing anyone in my family has ever said to me. My mother, of course, did not call. My mother did what my mother has always done, which is to try to control the story even as it collapsed around her. She called Dana, not me, and she was imperious, and she demanded to know what I wanted, what my price was, what it would take to make me, quote, be reasonable about all of this, as if my owning my own house were an act of aggression she needed to negotiate. And Dana, who does not work for my mother and does not care about my mother's production, said simply, Mrs. Hollis, my client does not want anything from you. My client wants to attend her sister's wedding at her own property as herself. That is the entire demand. There is no price. And that, I am told, was the moment my mother finally, truly understood that she had lost, because a mother like mine can fight any demand, but she has no idea what to do with a daughter who simply wants to exist in the open. So I went to the wedding. I need you to picture this, because I lived it and I still can hardly believe it. I drove up to the house on Hillcrest Road on a Saturday in September, my house, the house I had saved and secretly carried for 6 years, and there was valet parking on my lawn and a white tent on my grounds, and 300 people in their finery, and I walked up the wraparound porch that I paid to have rebuilt, and I was not a liar, and I was not banned, and I was not difficult. I was the owner, and I was a guest, and I was, for the first time in my entire life in that family, simply and completely myself. An aunt I had not seen in years, my Aunt Lorraine, found me almost immediately, and she had clearly not gotten the memo that had changed in the last 2 weeks because she came at me with the old script. She said, Talia, I am so surprised to see you. We all thought you were too busy. We thought you and your mother were, well, you know. And she let it hang there. The invitation to confirm that I was the difficult one, the estranged one, the villain of the family. And for the first time in my life, I did not perform my assigned discomfort. I just smiled and said, No, Aunt Lorraine, I would not miss it. I love this house. And I let the double meaning sit there, invisible to her, delicious to me. And I got myself a glass of wine and walked out onto the porch that I had paid to rebuild. And I looked out at the valley view that was, in the most literal legal sense, mine, and I breathed. I watched my mother work the crowd, radiant in her element, telling the Ashworths all about her beautiful home, and I felt something I did not expect. I did not feel triumphant. I felt free, because her performance no longer had any power over me at all. She could tell that whole tent that she owned the moon, and it would not change one line on one deed in one safe 4 states away. The story had finally, permanently come loose from the truth, and only I knew it, and knowing it was enough. My mother saw me come in. Our eyes met across that crowded, beautiful room, in the house we both knew the truth about now, and something passed between us that was not warmth, but was, finally, honest. She knew that I knew. She knew that Camille knew. She knew that the one thing she could never survive, the truth being visible, was now standing in her foyer in a green dress, and that I had chosen not to weaponize it, and that my mercy was somehow more total a defeat than any revenge could have been, because I did not need to destroy her production. I just needed to stop being erased from it. Now, here is the part I am proudest of, and it is not the deed, and it is not Preston's panic, and it is not my mother's face. It is what I did with the Ashworths, because I could have told them. At any point during that reception, I could have found Genevieve Ashworth, Preston's elegant mother, and I could have quietly informed her of the truth about the house, about the family her son was marrying into, about the lie at the center of the appearance, and I could have watched the whole thing come down. I did not. Not because they deserved my protection, but because Camille did not deserve to have her marriage poisoned on the first day by the same cruelty I had spent my life absorbing. Camille had said the true thing. Camille had said, I am sorry, it was easier, and she had said it before she knew I would be kind, which is the only apology that counts. So I let Camille have her wedding. I danced at it. I gave a toast, actually, when the best man was too drunk to find his notes, a short one, and I looked right at my sister when I gave it, and I said, Marriages last when people tell each other the truth, even when the truth is hard, especially when it is hard, and I wish you a marriage with no lies in it at all. And Camille started to cry, and she knew exactly what I was saying, and so did my mother, 3 tables away, and that was the only revenge I took, and it was enough. Let me tell you where everybody landed, because life keeps going after the tent comes down. Camille and Preston got married, and they are, against all my expectations, actually okay, because Preston, whatever his failings, got the scare of his life and seems to have decided that honesty is a more comfortable way to live, and because Camille, freed a little from our mother, has slowly become someone I can almost be sisters with. We are not close, But we are honest now, and honest is the foundation that close is built on, and we are laying it one careful conversation at a time. Camille came to visit me alone, about 4 months after the wedding, the first time she had ever come to my home, and she sat in my kitchen and she cried and asked me to tell her the truth about our childhood, all of it, from my side, because she said she had spent her whole life being handed our mother's version and she wanted, for once, to hear mine. So I told her. And she listened, really listened, and at the end, she said something I did not expect. She said, I think I got the easier role, but I do not think I got the better one. She said, you got to leave and become someone. I got to stay and become mom's audience. And I realized, sitting there, that scapegoating does not have just one victim. It has the one it lands on, and it has the one it spoils. And the spoiled one loses something too, something quieter and harder to name. Camille is in therapy now. She is learning to make hard phone calls on her own. She has started, slowly, to disappoint our mother in small, necessary ways, which is the beginning of every real life. And she and I text almost every day now. Small things, nothing dramatic, the ordinary traffic of two sisters who are inventing, at 30 and 34, the relationship they were never allowed to have. That, more than the deed, more than the house, is the thing I would have paid $400,000 for if anyone had ever told me it was for sale. My mother and I have a relationship that I can only describe as a permanent, quiet standoff. She lives in the house on Hillcrest Road still, because I never took it from her, and I never will as long as she lives, because I meant that promise even when she did not deserve it. But she knows I own it. Every day she wakes up in a house she does not own, that her difficult daughter saved and holds, and I have made my peace with the fact that this quiet knowledge, this daily awareness, that the truth is bigger than her story, is the only accountability my mother will ever face, and that I do not need any more than that. I stopped needing my mother's approval the day she put her lie in writing, because that letter, the cruelest thing she ever did to me, was also the thing that finally set me free. She handed me, in a certified envelope, the one thing 34 years of therapy had not fully given me: proof that I was never the crazy one. I kept the cease and desist. People think that is strange, but I framed it, and it hangs in my home office on the wall right above the fireproof safe where I keep the deed. Two pieces of paper, one lie and one truth, hanging one above the other. And on the hard days, the days when that old scapegoat voice creeps back in and whispers that maybe I really am too much, too cold, too difficult, I look at those two framed papers: the letter that says my claim is false, and the deed that says my claim is the only true thing in the entire story. And I remember which one the county recorder believes. So here's the only thing I have for you, and then I will let you go. If you are the scapegoat, the difficult one, the one they lean on in the dark and are ashamed of in the light, I need you to hear me very clearly. Your reality is real. The fact that they have all agreed on a story about you does not make the story true, it just makes them comfortable. And one day, if you protect yourself while you help them, the way a good lawyer once taught me to, the truth is going to come and stand in the foyer in a green dress, and it is not going to have to say a single cruel word. It is just going to have to stop apologizing for existing. Tell me in the comments about the time you finally stopped doubting your own reality, and I will see you in the next one.